They used to laugh at the delivery guy, mocked him whenever they got the chance. That is, until the day he became their boss and handed them their pink slips. Dorian Matthews had been delivering packages around downtown Phoenix for nearly 10 years. He knew every back alley, every service door, every receptionist who barely looked up when he arrived. The job wasn't flashy, but it paid the bills, and he took pride in doing it right. Most people just saw him as a guy in a uniform. Someone you forget 2 seconds after seeing him. And at Whitmore and Klein, a fancy marketing firm with marble floors and tall windows, that attitude was even worse. The first time Dorian stepped through those glass doors, he expected a normal delivery, but he quickly picked up on how people looked at him, like he was either invisible or not worth their time. The receptionist didn't even look up while signing for the package, already busy with something else. Dorian didn't mind. He was used to that, but then he started noticing more. The quiet laughs, the glances, the way some of them snicker when he walked by. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe he was imagining it, but then it became too clear. One afternoon, as he dropped the box on the front counter, a voice cut through the office chatter. "Man, imagine if the delivery guy was our boss." Laughter followed. Dorian didn't turn around, but he felt his face heat up. He knew that voice, Ryan Caldwell, one of the top executives. Always in tailored suits, always loud enough for others to hear. Another voice jumped in, this time a woman. "Please, he's probably good at lifting boxes, not running meetings." More laughter. Dorian kept his face calm and handed the tablet to the receptionist. She gave it back without saying a word. He had faced worse before. Years of ignoring this kind of thing. But this time was different. It wasn't just what they said, it was how sure they were. Sure that someone like him could never be in charge. As he walked out, he passed rows of glass offices where workers sat behind fancy desks, sipping expensive coffee, pretending to be busy. Some looked at him with no interest. Others didn't look at all. Just another delivery guy. Just someone passing through. But then at the door, he caught a glimpse of himself in the glass. His uniform, the scanner, clipped to his belt. His hands, rough from lifting boxes for years. That was all they saw. And for the first time in a long while, that bugged him. Outside, the Arizona sun was bright. He climbed into his van and sat still for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. He wasn't mad. Anger fades. This was something deeper, sharper. They thought they had him all figured out. They had no idea. But soon they would. Dorian wasn't someone who dwelled on things. Over the years, he'd dealt with people looking down on him, assuming he wasn't smart, acting like he wasn't there. It didn't surprise him anymore. But that day at Whitmore and Klein stayed with him. That night, after his last delivery, he pulled up outside his small apartment in Mesa. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom, old carpet, a kitchen with worn cabinets. But it was his. He sat in the dark, hands still on the steering wheel, watching a streetlight glow outside. For years, he told himself it didn't matter what people thought, as long as he worked hard and earned his pay. But that night, that belief didn't hold up. The way they laughed, it wasn't just ignorance, it was belief. They were sure they were better than him. Sure that someone like him could never be in charge. He needed to talk. Dorian picked up his phone and called the one person who always understood him. His older brother, Malcolm. Malcolm answered after 2 rings. "Yo, you good?" "I'm good," Dorian said. "You? What's up?" Malcolm asked. Dorian paused. Had one of those days. Malcolm laughed. "Let me guess, some rich folks acted like you didn't belong?" Dorian sighed, rubbing his forehead. Something like that. "Not new," Malcolm said. "No," Dorian agreed. But today hit different. Malcolm didn't push him to explain. He waited. Always did. "They laughed," Dorian said finally. Like, out loud laugh at the idea of me being anything more than delivery guy. Malcolm went quiet for a second. "And that got to you?" "Yeah," Dorian said. Malcolm replied with something Dorian didn't expect. "Good." Dorian frowned. "Good. Yeah, means you're tired of it." Dorian leaned back, eyes on the dashboard. "So what?" I quit my job because a couple clowns disrespected me. Nah, Malcolm said, but you're smarter than that. Smarter than them. Dorian let that sink in. He had always been good with numbers and strategy. At 16, he turned a few $100 into a few thousand flipping sneakers. Later, he learned how to invest, stocks, businesses, even real estate. He understood how money worked. But he never went all in. Malcolm's voice broke through his thoughts. Remember what Dad used to say? When people only see you one way, you got two options. Prove them right or prove them wrong. Dorian exhaled. Yeah, I remember. So what are you going to do? Dorian didn't answer right away. He thought about Whitmore and Klein. The suits, the smug grins, the way they laughed like he could never be anything more than a delivery guy. Maybe up until now, he'd been thinking too small. He looked at the old steering wheel, then at the delivery papers stacked on the dash. This wasn't all he was. He knew that, but they didn't, and that needed to change. Because proving them wrong wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was going to happen. He wasn't just a delivery guy, not really. That was just a part of him they saw. The part they assumed was all he had. But behind the uniform, behind the routine and worn-out boots, there was more. He had been building something quietly. While they spent their days making marketing plans and pitching to clients, Dorian had been doing his own kind of planning. He'd always had a business mind. Even as a kid, he found ways to make money. While other kids spent allowance on toys, he flipped rare sneakers. He knew where to buy them and who'd pay twice the price. By age 20, he moved on to used cars. Buying, selling, learning how to make a deal. Then came stocks, small businesses, real estate. He never showed off, but he learned. He watched. He grew. And for the past year, he'd been working on something bigger. He had a business plan, one that had caught the attention of serious investors. People who didn't care about where he came from, but about what he knew. They saw his talent. They saw how he spotted problems, predicted value before others could. Now, they were ready to invest. He had been meeting with them after long shifts, late nights on Zoom, studying finances, fine-tuning the plan. He had already helped turn around 2 failing businesses. Quietly and effectively, no one at Whitmore and Klein had any idea, but soon they would. One evening, he sat across from his main investor, Anthony Wells, in a private hotel lounge downtown. The place was classy, leather chairs, low lights, and quiet conversations over expensive whiskey. Wells was sharp, a serious businessman who made his fortune in real estate. He didn't waste time. So, tell me again, Wells said, sipping espresso. Why Whitmore and Klein? Dorian leaned in. Because they're in trouble, and they don't even know it. Wells raised an eyebrow. Explain. Dorian opened a folder and laid it on the table. They've been losing clients all year. Poor leadership, old school strategies, wasting money. They look successful, but their debt is crushing them. He tapped the paperwork. 6 months. That's all I give them before they downsize or sell. Wells flipped through the pages. You sure? Dorian nodded. I've been watching. Their biggest clients are pulling away. They're not holding on to business like they used to. They were leaning on their reputation, not actual results, and it was catching up with them. Wells smirked. So, you want to be the one to buy them out? Dorian didn't even pause. I don't just want to buy them. I want to fix them, restructure the company, cut out the dead weight, bring in new talent, and turn it profitable again. Wells leaned back, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. That's a bold plan. It's a smart one, Dorian replied. Wells chuckled. You've got confidence, I'll give you that. He took another sip of his espresso, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a check. He slid it across the table. Dorian looked at it. The amount was exactly what he needed to make his first move. You've got my support, Wells said. Don't make me regret it. Dorian picked up the check. It felt heavy in his hands, not because of the money, but because of what it meant. This was the beginning. The same people who had laughed at him were about to find out the hard way. They'd been laughing at their future boss. Dorian knew this wouldn't happen overnight. Buying a company wasn't like buying a car or flipping a stock. It took careful planning, patience, and knowing exactly when to act. He had spent months studying Whitmore and Klein's finances, watching their mistakes, learning where they were weak. On the outside, the company still looked impressive. Sleek offices, polished brand, everything looking perfect. But inside, things were falling apart. Big clients were pulling back. Spending was out of control. And the leadership, they had no idea how to fix anything. And Dorian wasn't the only one who saw it. In business circles, people had started to whisper. Rumors of layoffs, restructuring, trouble brewing. Some workers sensed it. Others were in denial, thinking their firm couldn't possibly fail. But Dorian knew better. With Wells and the other investors on his side, he started making quiet moves, smart moves. The first step was to gather ownership. Whitmore and Klein wasn't listed on the stock market, but had many private owners, former executives, early investors, people who had put money in years ago and now wanted out before things went under. Dorian contacted them one by one, made them offers they couldn't say no to. Some were skeptical at first. What was a delivery guy doing trying to buy into a major marketing firm? But money talks, and Dorian had leverage. Bit by bit, they sold their shares to him. It took weeks, lots of late-night meetings, and careful talks. But in the end, the paperwork was done. Dorian held the majority of the company's shares. He now owned Whitmore and Klein. The last step? Make it official. The CEO, Richard Langford, was a man who built a career on family wealth and good connections. He wasn't smart, just lucky. But luck doesn't last forever. Dorian sent a message, short and direct, to Langford's assistant. Subject line: immediate discussion required. The assistant, Ellen, had worked at Whitmore and Klein for over 20 years. She blinked in surprise when she saw Dorian's name in her inbox. She had seen him dozens of times making deliveries. Why was he emailing the CEO? She walked to Langford's office and knocked. "Sir, I just got an urgent email from Dorian Matthews." Langford didn't look up. "Who?" "The delivery guy," she said, unsure. Langford stopped typing and laughed dryly. "You mean that guy from the lobby? What could he possibly want?" "He's asking for a meeting. Right away." Langford leaned back in his chair, annoyed. The financial reports looked terrible, and their biggest client had just pulled out. The last thing he needed was nonsense. "Fine," he muttered. "Bring him in. Let's get this joke over with." When Dorian walked into Whitmore and Klein's office that morning, something had changed. The atmosphere felt different. People whispered in the halls. The receptionist, who used to barely notice him, suddenly sat up straighter as he entered. Langford sat in his office, clearly annoyed. He didn't even bother standing. "What's this about?" he asked, not even looking away from his screen. Dorian sat down across from him and placed a thick envelope on the desk. "It's about the fact that, as of this morning, I own the majority of Whitmore and Klein." Langford finally looked at him, frowning. Then he let out a short, mocking laugh. "You? That's not possible." Dorian didn't blink. "Check the documents." Langford hesitated, then grabbed the envelope and opened it. As he flipped through the papers, his face started to pale. He looked up again, this time not with amusement but with panic. "This is a joke," he muttered. "Who do you think you are?" Dorian leaned back, calm. "I'm your new boss." Langford slammed the documents down. "This company isn't for sale." "It was," Dorian said. "You just didn't know it." Langford opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at the numbers, searching for a mistake. But there wasn't one. It was real. He wasn't CEO anymore. Dorian stood up. "You have until the end of the day to clean out your office." Langford sat frozen, speechless. Dorian headed for the door, but paused and looked back. "Oh, and Richard?" He gave a small smile. "Don't worry. I'm sure there's a delivery job out there for you somewhere." Langford's face turned red. His jaw clenched. But he said nothing. The office would never be the same again. And for the first time in years, Dorian Matthews wasn't just passing through. He was in control. Taking over Whitmore and Klein was one thing. Making sure everyone knew it was another. As Dorian stepped out of Langford's office, The whispering got louder. Employees exchanged looks, confused and curious. They had seen him before, hundreds of times, but never like this. No uniform, no delivery scanner, just confidence in every step. Some noticed a folder he'd taken into the CEO's office, and when the door slammed shut behind him, a few stood up from their desks, trying to figure out what had just happened. Dorian ignored the stares. He had something more important to do. He turned to Ellen, Langford's longtime assistant. She was watching him, her face unreadable. "I need everyone in the main conference room," Dorian said. 10 minutes. Ellen hesitated. She had worked under Langford for years, but she'd also seen the cracks in the company. She glanced at the closed office door, then back at Dorian. "I'll send the email now." Minutes later, the employees of Whitmore and Klein slowly gathered in the glass-wall conference room. They murmured quietly among themselves. Ryan Caldwell, the same executive who once laughed at the idea of Dorian being in charge, leaned over and muttered to a coworker, "What is this? Some kind of security meeting?" His friend smirked. "Maybe they're laying off the janitors." The jokes stopped when Dorian stepped in front of the room. No one sat. No one spoke. The room went silent. He looked around, locking eyes with them. Some looked confused, others impatient, and a few, like Ryan, still looked amused. Dorian finally spoke. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I called this meeting." Dorian continued, "I'm now the majority owner of Whitmore and Klein." A wave of silence swept through the room. Someone gave a short laugh, waiting for the punchline, but it never came. Ryan folded his arms and smirked. "You're kidding!" Dorian looked directly at him, his face steady. "Do I look like I'm joking?" Ryan's smirk faded. Dorian placed a thick stack of papers on the table. Financial records, contracts, every signed document that made the takeover real. He motioned to the stack. "If anyone has doubts, feel free to take a look." No one moved. The truth started to settle in. The man they used to ignore, the one they laughed at, was now their boss. For the first time, Dorian paused. He let the room sit in the moment. Then he spoke again. "I've walked these halls for years. Most of you never noticed me. Some of you did, and made sure I knew exactly how little you thought of me." He glanced at Ryan for just a second. "I remember every joke, every insult, every time someone acted like I didn't belong." Ryan shifted but didn't say a word. "But I also remember something else." Dorian went on. "I remember watching this company make mistake after mistake, wasting potential because leadership refused to change. And I remember thinking if I ever got the chance, I'd do things differently." He stepped forward, voice steady. "Well, now I have that chance." A new kind of energy filled the room. People would cross their arms, slowly drop them. Others straightened where they stood. Dorian looked around before delivering the next line. "Things are going to change. Some of you won't like it. Some of you won't be here to see it." Silence. He let the message hang in the air, then added, "But for those of you willing to put in the work, to be part of something stronger, something better, there will be a place for you here." His eyes moved across the room. "This is not the same company it was yesterday. And it's definitely not the same company it was the day I walked in here as a delivery driver." He gave one final line, firm and direct. "If that bothers you, there's the door." The room went still. The words hit like a final verdict. For the first time, they understood Dorian Matthews wasn't just passing through. He was in charge. No one spoke. The weight of what had happened hung in the air. People looked around, confused, nervous, uncertain. Then someone broke the silence. Ryan let out a bitter laugh. "This is crazy," he muttered. "You can't be serious." Dorian looked at him calmly. "You really think I'd come in here and say all this if I wasn't?" Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "So what now? You show up and throw your power around, and we're just supposed to fall in line?" "No," Dorian said. "You're supposed to do your job. If you can't handle that, you're free to leave." Ryan scoffed. "Right, because you, of all people, are suddenly an expert at running a place like this." Dorian took a step closer. His tone didn't change. "I know more about this company than you think. I've watched how you all operate for years. The arrogance, the mistakes, the refusal to change. And I've spent even longer learning how to run successful businesses. Ryan's jaw clenched. You're making a big mistake. Dorian shook his head. No, the mistake was assuming I didn't belong here. There were murmurs in the room. Some employees looked uneasy. But a few, especially junior staff who had been ignored for years, looked curious. Dorian let the silence hang before continuing. Let's talk about mistakes. He pulled a folder from a stack and opened it. Ryan, since you've got so much to say, maybe you can explain why your department lost one of our biggest clients. Ryan's expression darkened. That's not. Dorian cut him off. I've got the reports right here. Overpromising. Delivering late. Refusing to adjust when the market changed. He tapped the folder. The client left, and they took millions in revenue with them. Ryan's face flushed. Dorian shut the folder. So if we're questioning who belongs here, I'd say you've got more to explain than I do. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't argue. The facts were all there. Dorian took a deep breath and addressed the room. This is the part where some of you start to worry, wondering if you'll still have a job. He let that sit before adding. And for some of you, the answer is no. Now everyone was paying attention. He gestured at the stack of documents. I've done my homework. I know who brings value. I know who's just skating by. I know who takes credit for other people's work. Some faces tensed. Others looked at their coworkers, suddenly rethinking every office move they'd made. This company is dead weight, Dorian said, and I don't carry dead weight. If you're here to work, to contribute, to help build something real, you've got nothing to worry about. But if you're here just for the paycheck, just for appearances, you won't last long. He let the silence stretch once more. Termination. Notices go out by the end of the day. The air was sucked out of the room. Ryan stepped forward. You can't just... I can, Dorian said. And I will. Ryan's pride flared. He wouldn't be the one to back down. Fine, he snapped, fixing his tie. If this is how it's going to be, I quit. Dorian nodded. That's the first smart choice you've made in years. Ryan glared, then turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Silence. Dorian turned to the others. For those of you still here, remember this. Whitmore and Klein isn't just going to survive. It's going to be better than ever. But that only happens with the right people. He scanned the room. Some looked worried. Some looked determined. If you're here to build something real, there's a place for you. But if you're here just because you feel entitled, just because you think things won't change. He pointed to the door. You can follow Ryan. The silence this time wasn't from shock. It was from understanding. Things had changed. Dorian Matthews was no longer someone to overlook. As he stepped out of the conference room, the entire energy of the office had shifted. Some people sat frozen. Others whispered. A few stared at him, processing what just happened. Some looked scared. Others looked curious. And a few looked inspired. Dorian didn't let it get to him. He had done what needed to be done. Now came the real work. He stepped into his new office, Langford's old one. It was bigger than he'd imagined. Leather chairs. Bookcases lined with unread business books. A huge oak desk that probably cost more than his first car. He walked to the window and looked out over the city. This moment should have felt different. He had worked for this, fought for this, proved everyone wrong. But standing there, he realized something. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. If it was, the satisfaction would have already faded. Watching Ryan walk out, seeing their shocked faces, that wasn't what drove him. He had done this because he knew he could build something better. Not just for himself, but for the people who had been ignored, dismissed, underestimated. There was talent in that office. People with real ideas. Under the right leadership, they could rebuild this company into something great. And those who didn't belong, they would be gone. He had learned something over the years. Respect isn't given. It's earned through actions, not titles. A soft knock broke his thoughts. Ellen, Langford's old assistant, stepped in. Everything okay? She asked. Dorian nodded. Just getting used to the view. She smiled slightly. I'm sure it looks different from this side. He looked at her, thoughtful. I have a question. All right, she said, curious. Why are you still here? She crossed her arms. Because I love what this place used to be. And I think, under the right leader, it can be that again. Dorian nodded slowly. She paused. To be honest, I didn't see this coming. I've watched CEOs come and go, but I never thought you'd be the one to end up running this place. Dorian chuckled. Neither did they. Ellen gave a small smirk. Langford's out. Ryan quit. Things are uncertain right now. There always is with change, Dorian said. She studied him a second longer, then nodded. Well, I think this place needs some change. Dorian smiled. Then let's get to work. As she walked out, Dorian turned back to the window. Change was coming. Not just for Whitmore and Klein. Not just for the staff trying to make sense of it all. But for him, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just proving himself. He was leading. And this was only the beginning. Because the truth is simple. Never underestimate someone based on where they start. One day, they might be the ones signing your paycheck.